Welcome to the From Concealment Podcast, the show for firearm enthusiasts who like to shoot, train, carry, and compete. Get ready for some shooting insight, firearm and accessory reviews, and of course, insight on concealed carry. And now, broadcasting from behind enemy lines in the From Concealment studio, it's Pete Mitchell and Dan Sams.
Welcome to the From Concealment Podcast. I'm Pete Mitchell.
And I'm Dan Sams.
And I am coming to you from behind enemy lines, as I like to call it, from Southern California. Dan, why don't you tell them where you're broadcasting from?
I am broadcasting from Northeast Ohio in a bunker so that the ATF can't find me.
Oh, we're starting off going there. I love it.
I'm just kidding. I'm in an office here in Northeast Ohio outside of Cleveland.
Yeah, no, I love it. You know, this is going to be a fun podcast for us. Dan and I have known each other for a few years, and I reached out to Dan. I was like, hey, man, I want to do a podcast, and I kind of want to do one on the shooting world, like something related to guns, shooting, training, all that stuff. And I know you're into it, and to give you a little bit of background on both of us, I'm actually a business growth and marketing consultant, and so is Dan. And Dan works more in the gun industry than I do. I have a couple of training clients, companies that run training and things like that in the gun industry. But we both have a love for basically all things shooting, firearms, guns, all that stuff. Basically the manly stuff. Tanks, barbecue. I mean, you know,
That's right.
if it has to do with all of that stuff, we have a love for it. Doesn't necessarily mean we're the best at it. I mean,
That's true.
I'm going to throw that one out there. I'm not coming to you saying, hey, I'm going to beat Bob Vogel in the next competition, right? That's not it at all, but yeah. So I mean, that's kind of the spirit behind our podcast here, and I don't know if you want to throw anything into that, Dan, or give any comments yourself.
I would say I'm in the same boat where I've been around guns all my life. I was raised around guns, and I have a huge love for them, both as a marketer and as a consumer. I've had a decent amount of training, but I would never consider myself an expert. I would consider this like a fan podcast where we're going to talk about what we love about guns. I would say between the two of us, we probably know more than most. And I think that puts us in a great place between the high-level experts and the average gun guy that allows us to let a lot of people know about a lot of cool things and translate it into layman gun terms.
Yeah, and you know, it's interesting with everything going on in our nation with, you know, all these active shooter situations. I shouldn't say all these. I mean, that makes it sound like there's one on every street corner. And statistically speaking, they're very really insignificant small. Unless you're in it, right? And then all of a sudden, it's the most significant thing in the world. Interestingly enough, Dan, I was doing the stats, and I think it was for 2018. When I was looking at the stats, I calculated it out. You had a 300% higher chance of being shot by a cop than being in an active shooter situation.
Yeah.
And the average cop, like less than 1%, even fire their weapon in their entire career. So that's just to show you just how, you know, insignificant in the massive scheme of things, active shooter situations are, unless, of course, you're in it. And then, none of that matters. Stats don't matter anymore.
Right. In the moment, we don't care. But you're exactly right. The chances of getting harmed in an active shooter situation are so low, especially what would be considered a mass shooting. There's such a small fraction of a percent. You're exactly right.
Yeah. And so anyway, we thought we'd kick off this first episode, let you guys know a little bit more about us, get you into our world. Now, as I like to say, I live behind enemy lines. No one in the gun world considers California a free state. In fact, we always talk about, hey, if we ever got to shoot our way out of this and get over to Nevada or Arizona, which are our closest relative free states, I mean, that's just the way California is. And yet California is so massive and so vast. You've got people on all levels of the spectrum. I personally live in Orange County, which is, in fact, where I live. I'm about a mile away from Long Beach, which is L.A. County. And the difference between Orange County and L.A. County is massive. So in California, if you're not aware, we don't have open carry. That's not legal here. Your concealed carry weapons permit, which we call a CCW in our state, your concealed carry weapons permit is issued by your county sheriff. And most counties in California will not issue concealed carry permits, which completely unconstitutional, right? So let's, just understand this is California. They kind of don't care about, well, the Constitution or freedoms or rights or anything like that. I mean, this is California. We live in, communist California. I happen to live in one of the few counties that actually does issue concealed carry permits. And so I carry, and I am grateful that I carry. Things happen all the time here in California. In fact, I was telling Dan yesterday about a situation that happened to me this last Sunday. So this last Sunday was Father's Day, and my son, who's 7 years old, he's like, "Hey, I want to hang out with Dad today," and nice. I was like, all right, that's cool. I was going to go to the movies, but, we'll go see Dark Phoenix, which, it's the X-Men movie. Wasn't really expecting much from it. I didn't hear anything great about it, but, I needed a movie that I could go to and that he would somewhat enjoy.
Right.
And so we go to Dark Phoenix, and we go to Dark Phoenix in Long Beach. So there's this place called the Long Beach Town Center, and we're in the theater. There's literally maybe 5 or 10 minutes left to the movie. And all of a sudden, the movie turns off, the emergency lights start flashing, and everyone's like, oh, what's going on? Like, my son's sitting there going, is this part of the movie? And I immediately recognize it for what it is. I'm like, there's something wrong. Like, I've never in my entire life been in a movie theater where this has happened. And then the PA system comes on, and the PA system's on automatic recording, and it says there's an emergency in the building. Please find the closest emergency exit and evacuate immediately. So, of course, with that, everyone's like freaking out. Like, you can see it in their eyes, right? You can see that panic look in people's eyes because we don't know what's going on. We don't smell any smoke. We don't see any fire. Nothing like that. I'm listening to see if I hear any pops, like someone's shooting somewhere. But you can see the panic in everyone's eyes. And so we're literally the last row in the theater. So we're all the way at the top. And so I take my son down the far side because I'm thinking, hey, there's an emergency exit, directly out that path. We'll get out of the building. And so, as it's taking forever to walk, because it's a herd, right? Whenever you leave a movie theater, there's a herd. It is slow going. You got to wait for everyone in front of you. And the guys are trying to open the emergency exit, and the emergency exit won't open. Like,
oh, man.
I know, right? I'm like, you have got to be freaking kidding me. Yeah. And my son is, he's scared, so he's holding my hand. But you know what's ironic? And you can see the panic look in everyone's eyes because no one knows what's going on, and everyone's thinking active shooter. I mean, we just had a big shooting situation happen out here at a Costco over the weekend, and that was like fresh on everyone's mind. So, like, people don't know what's going on, and I'm like trying to position my son on. I'm like, okay, what side should I have him on if there is a shooter? Because I need my gun, so I didn't want him holding my gun hand, right? I wanted him on my other hand, but at the same time, I'm like, okay, but now that actually has him more exposed. And so, you have all these crazy thoughts going through your head, But what's ironic is because I was carrying a firearm, and as I was joking with some friends, I go, it's Long Beach. There's no way I'm the only person in there with a firearm. I'm just probably the only person in there legally with a firearm.
That's right.
I mean, this is the home of Snoop Dogg. So,
That's right.
But I literally, it was funny to me because I didn't feel like at a disadvantage. Like, because I knew, and I'm not kidding, man, I was like so grateful. We're walking down the stairs. It's taken forever. You got all these thoughts going through your head. And one of the thoughts going through my head is, man, I'm glad I'm wearing my Glock 19 with my RMR. I've got my standard capacity mag. I got one in the chamber. I literally practiced on it this last week and was dead on. I was like, I don't feel underprepared. I feel like if the stuff hits the fan, I'm going to be okay. I'll be able to hold my own in a situation. Not that you want to, not that any of that. Yeah. But, when you got your kid there with you, like the dynamics change. It's one thing if you're by yourself, right? But it's totally different when you're with family. Because now your concern is not for yourself. Your concern is for your family. Eventually, these big, huge guys were like banging into the emergency door. Man, they were like, we're not leaving here until we get this thing open. So we had already stopped going down that path, and we were going to go out the main way. It's still taking forever because the theater was full. They finally break the door open, and one of them turns around and goes, "Hey, we got the door open. We got the door open." And I'm like, "All right, that's it, son. We're going." And we just, hightailed it out of there. And again, now we're outside the building. We're at a different part of the building than I've ever come out of before. So it's like we still don't know what's going on, right? We don't know if it's a shooter situation. If it's a shooter situation, at this point, I'm out of the building. I want to get as far away from all this as I can.
Yep.
And so, we had to walk on the street a bit to finally get away. Then people everywhere. Like, obviously, they evacuated all of the theaters. And the ironic part was my son and I both had to pee really, really bad. And so my son's like, "Dad, I really got to pee." And I'm like, "Well, we'll find a bathroom." And we're trying to go somewhere where we can find a bathroom. And finally, as we get really, pretty far away from the theater, I hear the fire engines, and I'm like, okay, it's a fire. Not like that's better, right? Especially when the emergency door doesn't open.
Sure, yeah.
But there would be like cops everywhere if it was an active shooter. I mean, it would be like they'd come down because cops live for that. They're like, "Oh, sweet, man, we get to go to work." And but it was just funny to me because I was like, man, I am so grateful that I happen to carry the weapon that I am, probably most proficient at from a CCW standpoint. I happen to have my RMR on it, which just, I am like, to be frank about it, I'm like a surgeon when I have my RMR in, up to like 7 to 10 yards, not like competition where we're shooting out at 15, 20, whatever. Because then the red dot just gets really freaking big, and it's, I'm going to hit the target, but I'm not going to be hitting the bullseye with it. But
still going to be center mass, though.
I'm still going to be center mass. I mean, he's going to feel that in the morning, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But it's ironic because here too in California, we've got all these crazy rules on what you can carry. Like it's not a free state. Like, I don't joke about that. We are not a free state, and one of the rules is the firearm that you carry has to be listed by serial number on your permit. And so, if you're carrying a Glock 19 that is not the same serial number, you're committing a felony because you're not carrying the gun that's on there. So you have to be qualified on it, which means someone's signed off that you fired so many shots and you know how to handle it. And so, I mean, you are limited on what you can carry. Our county just happened to open it up within the last year or so and basically said, okay, you can have as many firearms as you want. You still got to get qualified on all of them. But it used to be they limited you to 3 and, then it was 5 and they're like, what do we care? If you want to have 20 guns on there, you can. I don't want to be the guy that gets pulled over by the cop and they're looking at my permit and they see 20 guns on it. Because then it's like, because most cops still don't think you should be carrying, at least in California, because that they want to be the only ones with the guns. They don't want you to have a firearm. But yeah, I was like so grateful that I was carrying my firearm, which I pretty much religiously carry with me everywhere I legally can, in almost every situation. So
well, and you train with it. Which, by the way, sets you apart from, unfortunately, even a lot of law enforcement that don't even practice. And this has been the conversation I've had with a lot of people where, it's like the plumber with leaky pipes, and not saying anything negative against cops. And there's a lot of cops that I know practice a lot. But you talk to a lot of these guys, and they're like, man, I shot for my qualification last time. But a lot of them are not gun hobbyists.
Right.
They carry for their job, and they might not have practiced in a long time. And that a lot of times I would rather be there next to a guy like you who's been proficient and practiced than your standard cop who hasn't done any shooting since the last time he had to make qualifications.
It's unfortunate and true that you say that, because I didn't know if that was a Southern California thing. Like, it's known in the gun community in Southern California that cops don't train. They gripe the most about having to pay for any training. They're horrible clients. In fact, I do a ton of training, like literally every month, guaranteed every month. I'm going to be at I would say a minimum of 2 trainings per month. And then usually 1 or 2 competitions as well. So, I mean, I'm constantly shooting my firearm. All of my firearms, actually. I'm definitely a Glock guy, right? I love the Glock. I shoot the best with the Glock. I got just a bunch of Glocks listed on my CCW. I carry a full-size 17 concealed. Nice. Because I'm like, when I carry the 17, forget it, man. No one's messing with me with that. I'm going to hit that target, which is very, very ironic, right? And I actually want to get a 34 specifically for concealed carry. Because again, we've got rules, and the county can make certain rules, your county sheriff, and our county sheriff says basically you can't have anything altered on your firearm if it's your carry weapon, which means like the trigger setup that I have on my current Glock 34 I use in competitions. Couldn't use that as a concealed carry because it would be violating the rules, which would then make me a felon if I got caught with it, and blah, 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 all that stuff. Yeah. So, but yeah, it's known that like cops don't train around here. And in fact, when I go to trainings, and they'll be like, "Oh yeah, meet Hector over here. He's applying for Long Beach PD," or Adam over here. He just got accepted into Orange County Sheriff's. Literally, the first thought that goes through my head is, okay, so the guy who just got accepted, this will probably be your last time here because you guys don't show up anymore. And then the guy who's trying to get in, I'm grateful that you're taking training, and I really hope you don't quit. But statistically speaking, I know you're not going to be here anymore. You're going to be done. You got in, and I don't know why that is. My cousins are actually CHP officers. I'm not close with them. I mean, I couldn't even tell you what their email address is. I see them like once every 5 years. But I just happened to see him this last holiday season, and apparently one of my cousins teaches firearms training for CHP, all the close quarter and shooting around the car and all that. And I was like, dude, you got to get me in. Like, let me come hang out and shoot, because man, I'd love to train and learn that stuff. So they don't all not train, but it's definitely. It's definitely one of those things around here. It's kind of known in the gun community that, last thing you want to be is if you see a cop starting to shoot, just dive, just get down and hope that nothing else happens. So, yeah.
That's the other thing I've mentioned is that the cops are at a disadvantage when they show up on the scene because they don't know the situation and what's been going on. And a person who's there has seen things go down, who is a concealed carrier, has the best opportunity to respond. First of all, quicker because they're already there, and also they're more likely to know what's going on. We hear these stories about the cops showing up and shooting the victim rather than the assailant. And again, this is not something against them. They're at a disadvantage when they show up at the scene. They don't know what's going on. And the nice thing here and where I'm at in the Midwest, a lot of the cops, not all of them, but a lot of them I talk to are like, man, I want everybody to carry. They're like, you can fix the problem before I get there, and you're on my side. And so a lot of them around here speak pretty positively of the whole situation.
Yeah, and, interesting that you say that, because, that's always the thought going on in my head is, okay, if I had to draw here in California, they're going to assume you're the bad guy when the cops show up, because no one has guns here. There aren't CCW holders. I mean, there are, especially in Orange County, but still, what they're used to is no one has guns except for bad guys, because most of the state is, not a carry state. I mean, like I said, being in Los Angeles County, you basically have to know a politician. And I'm not saying that facetiously, literally, you have to have an in to get your CCW in Los Angeles County. So there's so few of them that have it. I mean, they publish the stats. I think there's 900 people in LA County that have a CCW. There's something like 20,000 in Orange County who have it. So, it just shows you they won't issue them in LA County, but they will in Orange County. Certain other parts of the state, like where my family live up in San Francisco, there's 9 for all of San Francisco. They won't issue a CCW. Totally, completely unconstitutional. We get that, but that's why we're behind enemy lines, and you just gotta protect yourself. But you've had your own situations with that stuff.
Yeah, so I've had a few interesting ones, and this is why I tell everybody, while the chances of something happening are slim, you want to be carrying because you never know what might happen. And you're just in my life, I've had really 3 situations where I either was carrying or should have been carrying, and it was the presence of a firearm that de-escalated the situation.
Really?
But my favorite, So my favorite one, though, is one where, unfortunately, I wasn't carrying. I was working for a large church here, and in the Midwest, we'll say, just to kind of protect the innocent here. But it was the first day of school, and there was a Christian school associated with this church, pretty large campus. And we're having a hallway meeting. I've got my mug in my hand and having a conversation with somebody, and somebody says, so we get a call saying hey, there is an active shooter at the school, which would mean a matter of 200 yards away. And so we obviously have 2 thoughts right away. One is, oh my gosh, and I'm thinking I wish this place would let me carry. Our executive pastor had made a very clear declaration that nobody was going to be allowed to conceal carry, and I'm like, here I am, you can't protect me, and I don't have a firearm because you'd fire me if I had one. And so I'm simultaneously mad and a little confused because we're like, man, we haven't heard any shots. I'm thinking we're close enough. We should be hearing shots if there's an active shooter. So you can imagine there's just moments of confusion. And as I'm standing there with my mug in my hand, the SWAT team rolls in. Guns drawn, pointed at me, and they're yelling for us to go on lockdown. And so I'm like, man, this is going down. This is the real deal. And so we go, jump in, I go in my office, turn the light off, the whole thing, which, by the way, I hated doing. I'm thinking man, I'm a quarter of a mile from my house. I want to have a weapon, and this doesn't feel right. But we're on lockdown, and we pull up the little police blotter app and start listening to what's going on. Actually, my wife pulls up the app because I couldn't get it downloaded fast enough. And she says, yeah, there's something, they're concerned. And she's texting me all these little bits, and she's like, now there's something about a misunderstanding. And wait a minute, they're a little annoyed. Something about a phone call and a misunderstanding. And I'm like, that's weird. And then the fateful thing, she's like, something about a Nerf gun. And I'm like, oh crap. So it was a tradition on our church staff that when we'd been a little stressful and things had been busy, we'd break the tension by having a Nerf battle. Just so happened that About an hour and a half earlier, I had started one of these Nerf battles. Unbeknownst to me, I walked past one of the assistants and just, fired the first Nerf shot. And I can't tell, her long hair has her hand covered. She's on the cell phone with her daughter. And she just says, "Gotta go, shots fired," and hangs up the phone. She was leaving a message. So the daughter gets the message maybe 45 minutes later and freaks out, doesn't know what to do, so she dials 911. So the SWAT team shows up and had a, by the way, 6-minute response time from the time they get the call to getting there, which is considered really fast. But I'll tell you what, 6 minutes.
Oh my gosh.
We could have all died in 6 minutes.
Yeah.
This would have been an actual shooter. And so, and they were, patting themselves on the back. They saw this as like the ultimate training practice. And I'm like, hey, yeah, great, man. Get here in 6 minutes. Way to go. I'm thankful that's quick, but it is not as quick as bullets. And so the really funny thing, though, is I know a lot of cops, man. I know so many cops all over. And so a buddy of mine was at the time, he's with the FBI now, but he was working with a police department in North Carolina, and he heard about this situation, knows nothing. I haven't told him about it. He sends me a message. He's like, hey, I heard about a Nerf gun, what they thought was an active shooter at a school at such and such. Was that you? And I'm like, yep. So apparently my reputation is wide enough for people to figure that out.
That's awesome.
So, yeah, man. That was a great time. Glad it worked out. Glad it wasn't anything. I actually, now I'm thinking of I've got 3 other scenarios. We'll have to tell those stories another time. But that was one of the funnest ones where I was a low-key fugitive for about a week until things blew over, because I'm like, I don't want it to get out that I was that guy.
That you were the guy that started the whole thing?
Yeah. But
wow.
Wish I'd had a gun still. Wish I'd had it on me.
Yeah, it's amazing. I get that there are a lot of anti-gun people, but it's ridiculous at this point. Like, you can't put that genie back in the bottle. There's, what is it, estimated somewhere between 300 to 600 million firearms in the United States. I'm sorry, man. It's too late. You can't ban them. You can't legislate them away. I was reading a post by a friend who he's a really conservative friend, but he's not a fan of guns. And a big part of that is because he went to Vietnam. And so he saw firsthand what guns do to people. And because of that, he's not a fan. But he's like, look, I'm not a fan of them, but you're crazy if you think you can legislate them out at this point. You have to allow people to carry to protect themselves. Now, because he doesn't like them, he chooses not to carry. He's also, on the back nine of his life, and he's probably not worried about it nearly as much. His kids are all grown up, and now they have kids and all that kind of stuff. But he said an interesting line that really stuck out to me, because he was talking about, it was an article related to ghost guns, which I love 80%ers, and we'll get into that in other episodes. They've basically become illegal here in California because, again, communist state. But his line that I found so interesting, he goes, all of these laws will only regulate those willing to be regulated. Yeah. And to me, that was the key right there. He's right. Yeah, you have to be willing to submit yourself to these crazy laws that we have, especially here in California, because most people not going to submit to the law, not going to worry about it. And that's what we're seeing. So
yeah. Well, and then that leads to just the mentality of, most of us were like, hey, man, I'd rather be obeying the laws than not obeying the laws. And what we're finding as there's an increase in gun laws, and then just, your average citizen can get in trouble on accident for so many things. And I know my buddy Leroy, you'll hear me mention every now and then, Leroy's thing is like, hey, just pick a gun law that is unconstitutional, and go ahead and just break it now. And I'm not advocating for that, but his idea is like, get used to being outside the law. And I'm like, oh man, the fact that we're even having this conversation scares me. But I'm hearing that more and more in the gun community, man. And I'm like, I'm not against that, but I don't know, be careful, man. Just a wild time, man. It's a really wild time. I never thought we'd be here. But here we are.
I think in California, I think they use most of these gun laws in my mind, very criminally. Like, our politicians are just criminals, and they don't even hide the fact in California. Yeah. But they want to have something that they can hang over your head, send you to jail, take away your rights, should they choose to. That's not the way laws are supposed to be. It shouldn't be, you want to have this in case you need to someday use it, but that's how they're using this stuff. Yeah. And, you figure that you lose your right to vote. Well, no wonder nothing ever changes, because they've taken away your voice in the whole system, and then they take away all of your firearms. I mean, for just about anything nowadays. I mean, it's ridiculous. So...
Well, and there's so many, even beyond gun laws, there's so many laws that you can accidentally break and not know. Yeah. And you'll find that they're very strategically enforced, and just plain facts of it, they're usually enforced the most against minorities, and so there's this mentality to have conversations with a lot of my African American guys here that would say like, wow, this is legal? I mean, I didn't even know you could legally do this. And I'm like, yeah, man, this part's legal. That part over there is not legal. But, man, it's just a rough situation, man. And so hopefully one of the things we can do on this podcast is bring to light some of the laws that are clearly infringements, some things where we have more freedom than we might realize, and we should exercise that freedom. And either way, man, I'm glad we're carrying.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Dan, thanks so much for doing this first episode, and we're looking forward to, like Dan said, to bringing you guys a whole lot of cool stuff. We're going to bring to you, wow, I don't know if you guys heard that ding, but man, I got a loud ding in my ear. I'm getting what do you call it, text messages like crazy. We've got some great guests lined up. We're going to bring you some of the top shooters in the nation onto the podcast. We're going to bring people from law enforcement, the ones that dare to come on the show after we just, right, in the first episode said, those guys don't train. But,
we still love you guys.
To a degree, okay.
Pete, as Christians, we love them despite their sin.
That's right, despite their chosen sinful profession. But yeah, so this will be just a fun podcast. I think you guys are going to enjoy it, and we want to thank you for being here with us on this very first episode.
Yeah.
Take care, everybody.
Take care.
You've been listening to the From Concealment podcast with Pete Mitchell and Dan Sams. Be sure to tune in next week for more gun talk. Also, check out the From Concealment website for more shooting-related goodness at FromConcealment.com.